They are caught in a moment of high anxiety and they can't figure out how to give themselves the relief that they're looking for. They know about breathing, they know about meditating, but they're not actually working. Breathing, meditating, they're not anxiety relief tools. They're anxiety management tools, and there's a difference. You are essentially telling your anxiety to calm down without ever asking it what it's scared of. Hello, hi, welcome back. If you're new here, hi, I'm so glad that you found us and you found your way over to my little sliver of the internet. If you are new here, hello, my name is Adriana. I am a subconscious reprogramming specialist, and I help women uncover the things that are stopping them from connecting to themselves, feeling like themselves, and really living out the life that they want to be living. And I have an unpopular opinion today that I wanted to share, and it stems from a lot of the clients that I work with. The people that I work with, they don't usually come to me for anxiety. Usually the bigger things that they come to me for are, they feel disconnected from themselves, they feel disconnected from their potential. They keep ending up in the same places, or they're in the middle of a transition, and usually anxiety is one of the things that's getting in their way of living the life that they want. And one of the things that tends to happen is that they are caught in a moment of high anxiety and they're trying to get relief, and they can't figure out how to give themselves the relief that they're looking for because they're so activated and nothing is really working. And they're in a place where they know about breathing, they know about meditating, they know about grounding and their 5 4 3 2 1 practices. They know all of these things, but they're not actually working. They're trying to go for a walk, they're not feeling calm, they're watching a movie, nothing is really helping their mind stop, and they're not really able to stop their body from physically feeling the anxiety too. It kind of feel like it's rushing through their body. And the hardest part of all of this is that it's not about the anxiety. Yes, the anxiety feels horrible in the moment, so we're not ignoring that, but it's that in those moments they lose access to themselves. They can't really think clearly. They don't really know what to actually believe in those moments. They don't know truth from conditioning. They don't know which way to look. They're just so activated, and they want to feel connected to themselves, but they don't, because anxiety becomes the loudest voice in the room. And it's confusing to them because they think that the things that they're doing should be helping. They think that going for a walk or having a conversation or trying to sit and meditate should be helping, but it's not. And I'm not saying that those things are not important. That is not the claim that I'm making. They are important, but it can be really confusing when you think that that's the only way to find relief from your anxiety, because sometimes you're so activated that they don't help. They help in moments of when you're driving and someone cuts you off, and you kind of take a deep breath and you're able to be okay, I'm fine. Let me bring myself back to calm. It works in those moments because that's a lower stakes anxiety moment and the tool does its job. But what happens in the moments of life when you don't feel fine, when you can't tell yourself, you're going to be okay because you don't actually know where the anxiety is stemming from to tell yourself, I'm going to be okay, right? It feels like lying to yourself. That's usually what the anxiety that my clients are feeling is. If it's coming from a threat, something about their safety, their security in that particular moment feels threatening. And because so much of that is subconscious, moments that get triggered and cause anxiety where you're where is this even coming from? Those are really subconscious moments. You can't regulate your way out of something that you can't see yet. So here is my unpopular opinion. Breathing, meditating, thinking positively, your affirmations, they're not anxiety relief tools. They're anxiety management tools, and there's a difference. They help you manage the anxiety in the moment, but they don't actually bring you relief. And that might be really confusing because maybe you didn't really know there was a difference between management and relief. Maybe you thought they were the same thing. Maybe no one told you that they were ever different, but they are different, and that distinction is everything. So here's what I want you to understand about anxiety before we go any further. Anxiety isn't just a general feeling that shows up out of nowhere. Anxiety is a signal, and it's your system telling you that something here feels unsafe, something feels threatened, and that means underneath every anxious moment, there is something that is scared. There is a fear that got activated. There is a specific thing in your system that decided that this moment is threatening for. And that's really, really useful information, actually, because if there is something specific underneath it, something that is scared, something that needs to be met, then you need tools that can actually get down there and meet that thing. And that's where generic tools like your breathing or your meditation fall short. Sure, they can, calm the body, but they don't know what's scared. They're working on the surface when the thing that is scared is underneath the surface waiting to be seen. And that's why the analogy that I'm about to share hits the way that it does. Because if you think about it this way, that experience of like when you're really upset about something and you're just really emotional about it, and then someone tries to manage your emotions and they're like, it's okay, just calm down, just breathe, it'll be okay, like everything's gonna be okay, you're gonna figure it out. And it never lands, right? It almost feels even more frustrating that they're saying that. It never feels good. And it's because they're responding to the surface of what you're feeling. They're not asking what's underneath. They're just wanting the sensation to stop. And that's why it gets frustrating, because you don't feel met in that moment, right? When you think about the moments that you actually do feel a sense of relief, the moments where you do get met and you feel like, something just lifted off of my shoulder, what happens in those moments instead? Someone is seeing the thing underneath. Someone is understanding the emotion. Someone is meeting that emotion. Someone is meeting that need under the surface, and you feel a weight lifted off of your body because you feel so understood. You feel relief not because the situation changed, but because the right thing got touched, because you were actually met in that moment, right? That's the difference between management and relief, and your anxiety tools work the same way. When you're using generic anxiety tools, like, box breathing and grounding and affirmations, you are essentially telling your anxiety to calm down without ever asking it what it's scared of. And just like being told to calm down when you're upset, it doesn't land. It feels frustrating. The anxiety doesn't feel met, and so it keeps coming back. And I actually experienced this myself recently, where I was working on content for my business, and I was getting so overwhelmed with the strategy piece because I'm trying to move in a more aligned direction, and I'm just trying to figure out all of these different pieces and connect these dots. And it felt so unclear. I felt so anxious because of it, and I just felt overwhelmed with all of the information in my head, and I couldn't piece it all together. And I didn't have a chance to sit with it, right? Because I had stuff that I had to do. I couldn't really be in full-blown panic mode. I had stuff that I need to get done. So I didn't have a chance to sit down and look at what was going on. And so I used my breathing techniques. I was in the car and I was trying to, focus on my breathing, deep breaths, counting my breathing, trying to regulate my body and get myself to a place where I felt okay. And I was distracted enough, which is coping. I'm not going to deny that that's not a thing that does help in the moment, right? The thing is that it didn't actually provide me real relief, because I felt okay in those moments because I had to distract myself to move on with what I needed to do that day. But when it came time to actually sit down and work on my content again, the anxiety revved up the exact same way it had earlier that day. And then I felt just as anxious. So nothing really went away. Never really felt any sort of relief. It was just kind of like a short-term distraction or avoidance. And when the trigger isn't there, sure, you're not going to feel anxious, but that doesn't mean that there's any sense of relief, right? You're just kind of turning a blind eye. And again, sometimes that is necessary, but don't lie to yourself and think that it's fully resolved. You know what I mean? And so when I did get a chance to sit down and be like, okay, what the heck is going on? right now, I found that there was what was underneath all of that is a fear of failure, a fear of not getting it right. And once I could actually see that, of like, okay, all of this anxiety I've been feeling is really just this fear of not getting it right. And once I was able to look at that specific fear, that's when I could get really clear and I can ask myself, like, okay, is this true? If I put content out there and it doesn't hit the way that I wanted it to on the first try, is that actually failure? And I was able to actually answer that and be like, no, that's not failure. Like, I would learn from it, and then I would learn to pivot, and it would make me even clearer on my path or my message. And I would learn from that. And so I was able to actually meet that fear with what it needed, which was reassurance. And it was a reframe, but it was a reframe aimed at the actual thing that felt threatened. And that's the level your reframes and your affirmations and your self-talk need to work on. They need to match the fear underneath the anxiety. That's why the generic tools don't work. Because you can say, I am calm, I am soothed, all you want, but like, it's so generic, it's so vanilla, it feels like you're lying to yourself. Your subconscious doesn't believe that because your subconscious is operating much more on a specific fear. And the fear, the anxiety is trying to keep you safe. It's trying to say like, alert, alert, alert. And so saying, I am calm is not going to be like, imagine that. Imagine. I always think about this. Our anxiety is such a primitive part of our body. You have to remember, like, we are animals. Like, we have like buildings and internet and social media and all of this stuff, but like, think back to our evolution. We are animals. Our human existence was living in caves and the woods and stuff for literal more of our evolution than we have been living in like civilized societies, right? And so think about if our ancestors in the woods was having a threat response that was activating because they heard rustling in the leaves and they didn't know if it was a lion. Imagine if you could turn off that anxiety system by saying, I am calm, I am soothed, you would be dead. That lion would eat you, right? Because the anxiety is trying to tell you like, oh my gosh, pay attention to something, we feel threatened, like figure it out, right? Get yourself back to safety. And so telling yourself I am calm when your actual system feels like you are under threat, we don't want that. We think we want that. We don't want that because that's not how our system is designed to work. And we wouldn't want that. Think about like a modern day society or situation. Like if you heard something outside of your house at night or something, right? Like imagine if you were able to just turn off that anxiety by being like, everything's okay. And then you would be like, okay, everything's fine. But what if everything wasn't fine, right? Like you don't actually want your system to be turning off by something as simple as that. You want to be able to find the fear, meet the fear, and give the fear what it needs, because the fear might be saying something really important. And usually it is saying something really important. That's the thing, is we have such a tumultuous relationship with our anxiety these days that like we're so angry at it, we're so frustrated with it, we're so like, stop, why are you here right now? And I get it, because we are frustrated because we haven't had the right tools to help us understand what it's trying to communicate and why it's here and all of those things, and that is very frustrating. But when you have the right tools, you can understand that the anxiety is not the bad guy. The anxiety is just really misunderstood because it doesn't have, no one has been speaking its language. So it feels frustrating, but like anxiety is not the bad guy. That was a huge tangent. I don't even remember what point I was trying to make. Essentially saying like you want to be able to soothe the part that is feeling threatened. So if you're sitting with all of this and you're thinking like, okay, this is making sense, I think I kind of get it, but what do I actually do with this instead? Because all I know is the meditations, and all I know is how to ground myself with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I don't really know how to make this work for myself. I get it, and I'm not going to leave you hanging. I have some steps that I walk myself through, and I actually walk my clients through whenever they are having an anxious moment that is taking them away from their alignment, that is taking them away from feeling the way that they want to feel, moving through their day the way that they want to be feeling. And these aren't about managing the sensation. These are about actually getting relief for what's underneath the surface, what's activating that sensation of anxiety. So there are 3 steps. Step 1 is to find the moment. So anxiety always has a starting point, something turned it on, and your job in this step is to just locate the moment, not to solve it, not to explain it, just to find it. Figure out, when did I first notice this? I was feeling calm in this moment, but then I all of a sudden was feeling anxious. What was that moment? What was that thing that set it off? What happened right before I started feeling anxious? Who was I with? What was I thinking about? What was said? What was not said? What does this remind me of, even if I can't fully explain why? So getting really granular on what moment actually activated it. A lot of times we just know that we're feeling anxious and we don't really think past that. But what we want to do is backtrack. We want to find the moment that triggered it, because that moment is really important data. It starts to show you what was happening, what was feeling threatening, what your system was responding to. And this is, if you've heard me talk about this metaphor in past episodes, this is the knotted necklace example that I use. Like, you think that anxiety is just this one general thing, but it's usually a whole knotted jewelry mess, right? There's usually a thread. And so you don't want to be pulling on the whole thing. You don't want to just be looking at the anxiety of oh, I'm anxious. You want to get really specific of what moment actually led to the feeling of anxiety. And I will say that if you notice that your anxiety doesn't really have a really clear trigger, if it's more of just a general background hum that's kind of always there, that might be a different type of anxiety. I do have a quiz on the different types of anxieties that will help you figure out which one you're dealing with. So I will link that in the show notes for you as a resource. Once you know the moment, step 2 is to name the fear. So once you find the moment that triggered the anxiety, you want to dig a little bit deeper and you want to figure out what felt threatening in the moment, because anxiety is typically coming from a fear. And so we want to get really specific on what fear is actually coming up. What is that actual fear that is tied to that specific moment? And it's not the situation itself. It's that the fear that the situation is activating. And so we can kind of use the situation as an entry point into the fear. This is what I talk about as, I teach this with my clients, and I teach this in my program, Becoming Limitless, is life is a diagnostic. Life is always communicating with you, and you want to be able to pay attention to the signals and the sensations that are guiding you towards the deeper healings. And so anxiety is one of those things. It's not the situation itself, it's that the situation is associated with some sort of feeling of fear. So you want to be able to identify the moment, and you want to name the fear that's underneath. So you want to look at the situation and say, okay, what fear is this attached to? What is the anxiety telling me that it's afraid is going to happen? What would that mean about me if that fear did come true, right? The thing that it's fearful, if that happened, what would that mean about me? What do I think it would mean about me? What is the story I'm telling myself that it would mean about me? And what does that fear sound like when it's trying to talk to me? And if you don't know what the fear is, if you're thinking about this and you're like, I genuinely couldn't even tell you what the heck the fear is underneath, I hear you. And that's exactly why I'm putting together a new resource for you. I'm putting together an offer that is going to have a fear library that will break down the most common fears that I see in my work with my clients. And so when you're in that moment and you can't quite name the fear that's underneath, you're going to be able to look at the list, and you're going to be able to be like, oh, yep, that's the one. So it'll feel called to you when you kind of see it listed out. So I will share more on that offer soon. I'm so excited about it. I'm so excited for you to have that. It's going to be really useful for you in this exact moment. So step 2 is to name the fear. And then step 3 is to meet the fear. So this is the step that kind of makes everything else work. Now that you know what's exactly scared, you can respond to that directly. Not trying to make the anxiety go away per se, but actually meeting the specific thing underneath it with what it needs, right? The anxiety is trying to tell you something. The anxiety is trying to tell you, oh my gosh, there's a fear here. We feel threatened. So that's what's igniting the anxiety. So when you can meet that fear and give it what it needs, that anxiety kind of dissolves, right? And so for this, to meet the fear, you want to ask yourself, what does this fear need right now? What would I say to someone I loved who had this fear? What does the version of me who has already moved through this fear know that I need to know right now in this moment? And one way that I like to think about this whole like meeting the fear thing, is think about like a toddler. Think about when a toddler is screaming and crying. You can't expect the toddler to just stop crying on their own, right? Because they're crying to try to communicate something. They are thinking or feeling something that feels so overwhelming that they don't have the right words to kind of express it. They don't really know how to put communication to what they're feeling or sensing. And so they're expressing it through the screaming and the crying. And when you can understand what the toddler is trying to tell you, when you can get down to their level and you can meet them there, then that's when they settle. And it's not because you fixed everything, but it's because they felt heard and you were able to meet that need in the moment. And so your fear works the same way. A lot of times we feel this like consistent nagging anxiety of like, it keeps coming up and I don't know why it keeps coming up. And that's because our inner world is trying to communicate something with us. And we keep trying to move past it. We keep trying to ignore it and say like, there's nothing wrong here. Just stop with the anxiety. Keep moving forward, right? And so we keep ignoring it. We keep managing the sensation of the anxiety on the surface instead of listening to what it's actually trying to tell us. It's really our inner world saying, hey, hello, there's something here. We feel really threatened by something. Like we feel unsafe. We don't know what to do and you should stop ignoring us. And so it keeps rearing its head because it's being asked to be looked at. And so when we can meet that fear, when you can look at it and acknowledge it and give it what it actually needs, when you can soothe it, that's when the relief comes, because then the anxiety has no reason to activate because you've looked at what it's trying to communicate to you. You've looked at what feels unsafe and you've met that, you've soothed that, you've looked at that, you've processed through that. And so then something inside of you finally feels seen. Just like in the moment when you're feeling upset about something and someone finally meets you where you're at and you feel heard and you're like, oh, wow, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. Oh, you feel a weight that's lifted off of your shoulders. You feel a sense of relief because you were met in that moment. Your anxiety feels relief when you meet it in that moment. So the question that I want to leave you with is not how do I manage the anxiety? The question is, what is that anxiety scared of? In that moment, what is your inner world scared of what's going to happen? And not in a general way, get specific. When anxiety shows up in this moment, what does it think is going to happen? What is it that you see playing out? What is it fearful of playing out? What does it think is being threatened? What is it trying to protect you from? That's the threat. And that's where real relief actually starts, because this isn't about becoming someone who never feels anxious. That's not what I believe. I don't even think that that's possible, and that's not something you want. Again, anxiety is an important emotion that we feel, just like frustration, just like anger, just like happiness and joy. Anxiety is an emotion that we want because it keeps us safe. So the goal is not to become someone who never feels anxious again. You would not want that. Trust me. The goal is for you to become someone who knows how to come back to themselves after they feel anxious, because that's essentially what the anxiety does. Is the anxiety takes us out of alignment. The anxiety takes us out of connection with ourselves, and it makes us spiral. It makes us do things that we don't really feel comfortable doing because we don't know how else to make it go away. It disconnects it from ourselves. And so those are two very different goals, right? Becoming someone who never feels anxious is very different from someone who has a different relationship with their anxiety, is no longer fearful of it, knows how to manage it, knows the step-by-step process to reconnect with themselves. That is what I teach my clients. It is not about anxiety management. It is about remaining connected with their authenticity, remaining connected with what they want, who they want to be, how they want to live their life, and looking at the moments that disconnect us from that take us off of our path. And anxiety is one of those moments. And so that's why I'm so excited to be putting out my new offer, the Relief Protocol, because it's going to transform anxiety from something that happens to you into something that you know how to navigate. And it's going to give you a clear process, a step-by-step process, instead of guessing what to do. It's going to give you relief in the moments that you need it most. It's going to give you your ability to calm yourself without relying on constant reassurance. It's going to give you a growing sense of self-trust. It's going to give you less fear around anxiety. It's just going to transform your relationship with anxiety, which therefore transform your relationship with yourself, which is all that my work is about, is reconnecting you with your inner self, your inner world, your inner guidance, and getting you back into a path that you feel like you're able to choose, right? I think I talked about this in a previous episode. Anxiety no longer gives us access to the ability to choose. We're not able to choose what feels good for us. We're not able to choose what feels authentic. We're not able to choose in those moments how to feel, how to think, how to act. And we feel kind of powerless in those moments. And so if I can give you a tool that allows you to, gives you confidence, so that way anxiety doesn't ruin your day. That's the other thing, is you lose so much time, so much energy, days pass because you're like, I cannot get rid of this feeling. I don't know where the heck it's coming from. Everything in my life is pretty much fine. What the heck? Where is this coming from? You lose so much time and energy to it. And so if I can give you a tool that will allow you to reconnect with yourself and get your day back, then I am going to. I'm so excited. And now I'm rambling because that's what I do when I'm really excited. So anyway, I am putting together the last few recordings in that offer, and it should be live within the next few weeks. So keep an eye on it. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you follow, and I will be announcing it when it's live. And until then, I will see you in next week's episode.